Let me welcome all of you to Chat with Matt. My idea of starting Chat with Matt, which I started last May, was to find interesting speakers who had something to say. And our very special guest, George Bradt, is one of those people. I've known George since the early 2000s. Met him at a meeting. We connected immediately. And every time we talk, we have so much to talk about, because we're all interested in this idea of communication and creating success, not just in job search, but also one of the goals of our networking group is once you find your job, one of my goals is to help you stay employed. And that's where George fits in. So without any further ado, I'm going to have George introduce himself. My experience has always been that people who introduce me usually make me cringe and usually muff it pretty badly. So I have followed a practice on Chat with Matt, allowing my guest speakers to introduce themselves. In of particular interest, George, is your journey, how you got to where you are today. So I'm going to spotlight George and have him take over. George, introduce yourself to everyone, and thank you for joining me on Chat with Matt.
Well, Matt, Eva, Steve, Tom, Karen, Chip, and hopefully David, and of course Peggy. Delighted to be with you. I'm going to give you a relatively short introduction and let Matt or any of you pull out of it what you want. Background in sales, marketing, and general management, 20 years or so at companies you all know. Unilever, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola. My last job, literally around the world. My last real job was with J.D. Power and Associates. I ran one of their divisions, which we then spun off as a freestanding company with me as the chief executive. So along the way, I met a different Matt, not Matt Budd, who we were bringing into work as a vice president for us at Coca-Cola in Japan. And we spent a fortune on this guy. We had a ridiculously expensive executive recruiter. We had to buy out his stock options, give this guy a signing bonus, too much money. We had to relocate him and his family and his dog and his wine to Japan. And he showed up day one after hundreds of thousands of dollars and months and months and months, and was greeted with, "Oh, hi, you're here. Fantastic. We are so excited to see you. Wait. We're going to need to find you an office because COVID hasn't hit yet and you need your own office. And we got to find you a computer and Meishi business cards." And I looked at this and went, "Are you kidding me? We're the Coca-Cola company. We should do this better." And so I pulled two people together and said, we got to figure out a way to do this better. Didn't know what it was called. And the next leader showed up a month later and we had our office ready. We had our computer ready. We had books for her. We had orientation session for her. And it went a lot better. And I said, there's something here. And I kept doing it. And I did it in China. I did it at J.D. Power. And then when I was done with J.D. Power, I said, I think there's a business here. And to Matt's point, I wanted to call it onboarding, and people looked at me like, "What are you talking about?" In fact, I went to Wiley and said I want to write a book called Onboarding, and they said, "Nobody knows what that is." So they made me make my first book was called The New Leader-Centered Action Plan, and it did really well, continues to do well. And then 3 years later, they came back to me and said, "We want you to write another book, and this one's going to be for the managers, and we want you to call it Onboarding." So I literally wrote the book Onboarding a very long time ago. So over the last 18 years, we've focused on executive onboarding, transition acceleration. We have reduced the rate of failure for new leaders from 40% down to below 10%, because I know a lot of you are financial executives, you like numbers. Top 10 clients have used us 180 times. We're about as good as it gets. And that's me.
Yeah, no, it's a shame in this world that we spend so much time trying to find a job, and we spend so little time focusing on what we need to do when we get started to keep the job. And even while we're working the job, even if we've kept it, which is the subject of today's conversation, which is how we keep the conversation going. how our,
Let
we
me give you
build our
one insight
relationship
on
with
that.
our staff. Pardon me?
You keyed up one analogy that some of you will like. Imagine you are driving from Ethiopia to Kenya. There's a quiz on this one, so pay attention. You get to the border in Moyale. You go into the police station, you clear your passport, you get back in your car. So you have now officially left Ethiopia and you are in Kenya. You get in the car, you sit down, you lock the door, you roll up the windows, you check the mirrors, you put your seatbelt on, you turn the car on, you put it in gear, you release the emergency brake, you put your foot on the gas. What is the next thing you must do? This is the audience participation session. Looks like Steve knows. Come on, Steve.
You're going to stop at the next gate for entering into Kenya.
Perfect.
I spent a lot of time in Africa.
You're through the gate. It's good. It's not what I was looking for. You're now through the gate. You are now in Kenya. You are on the road.
But the
Now
Kenyan, but the Kenyan customs people are going to stop you also.
Okay, so you're through that customs. Now what?
Got to find your way to the hotel.
Drive where you're going.
Drive. Karen,
We're
what?
not good at guessing, apparently.
So
Map.
you must switch sides of the road.
Oh, okay.
Ethiopia, they drive on the right. In Kenya, they drive on the left. Here's why it's not funny. Most companies drive on different sides of the road than you expect. And when you go into a new company, if you follow your instincts, you're going to have a head-on collision. And you've got to deliberately think through what's going on and ask questions. And that's my onboarding tip for the moment. Sorry, Matt, back to you.
Okay. No, take it away. We're now, I think in the world of job search, the phrase that I always cringe at is when people tell me they've landed, like they're now safe. And I immediately tell them, you've landed all right, but it's in a free fire zone.
Oh, absolutely. One of our first articles was on hot landings. And the analogy was, as you go into a hot landing, what do you do? Because you've got to accelerate progress.
Yeah. And
So,
everybody's
Matt,
shooting at you.
Yeah. So this is good. So I'm happy to talk, or you had some questions for me, or we had topics. You tell me which way you want me to go.
No, I think you've set the stage. Let's get started and talk about how in this world of Zoom, you do onboarding, because I've now experienced several people who have interviewed for jobs, been onboarded and started work and never actually met the people they're working with other than on Zoom. It's a different world.
You think? Okay, so let's go there. This is let's talk about communication, and let's talk about it in two ways. And Peggy, I know you'll correct me if you disagree with me, and I if you disagree with me, I absolutely respect your right to be wrong. So
my right to be wrong.
Yes, I would suggest it's worth thinking about your communication choices, both in terms of, I'll call it a more macro approach and a more tactical approach. It's almost strategic and tactical, but let's talk about macro. So, and some of this is like, duh. The first piece is you really want to think about different approaches for different objectives in different contexts. So, and Matt, you teed it up with the idea of interviewing and then onboarding.
Yeah. And they're very different activities, right, George? I mean, when you're interviewing, first you're trying to get accepted, and then they've decided they want you, and they're trying the charm school thing on you, and everything they're telling you is probably lies about how easy this is going to be. So they really set you up.
Oh, that's the old expat story. You all know. How many of you have been expats? So Steve, you've lived this. They, when they're trying to get you to do an expat assignment, they take you. It's this. You know this one. It's the they take you for a look-see. Anybody not know what a look-see is? You get a chance to go and meet people and see if you want to work with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the story of the guy that he dies. And he goes up to the gates of heaven and he meets St. Peter's, who says, listen, we're running a special deal today. We're going to let you spend one day in hell and one day in heaven and decide where you want to spend the rest of eternity. The guy goes, I choose heaven. He goes, no. You got to investigate it. You got to go for the look-sees. And he goes to hell, and the guy's a golfer. And he's lined up with the three greatest golfers of all time in his mind. It's like Palmer and Jones and Tiger Woods or whatever it is. And he's out there, and it's just this beautiful day, and he's playing golf, and it's just marvelous. And then they go out for lunch, and they swap golf stories, and day's over. And he goes back up to heaven, and Peter says, okay, you get to spend your day in heaven. And he's floating around on clouds and meeting people, and it's kind of like, it's nice. And he goes back to Peter at the end, and Peter says, okay, what's it going to be? He goes, listen, call me crazy, but I'm into golf. Boom. He's in hell, head down in the mud, flames all over the place, people whipping his feet. He goes, wait, where's the golf? And they say, that was just the look-see. Some of you got it, some of you didn't. But to Matt's point, there are these stages of onboarding where I know, by the way, it starts before your first contact. It starts with preparing for your first conversation with people, making sure you know what you want to do and who you're going to do and all that stuff. Then there's the interviewing time where you are selling, make no mistake about it. And there are only 3 interview questions. I'm happy to talk about those if you want, which means there's only 3 interview answers. And there's a trick question at the end, but so you're selling. Then when they offer you the job, again, to Matt's point, you're buying. And that's when you get to ask tougher questions and figure out, what's this really going on? Is this really heaven or hell? And that, and then you accept the job, and there's the time between acceptance and start, which we call the fuzzy front end, where you can do things and ask questions that are different than you can after you start, and different than you can before you accept the job, and different than you can before you are offered the job. And then there's day one and the rest of your time. And the communication is different at different times. So when you're being interviewed, you are selling yourself. And I would argue that there are really two or three parts to that. A part is giving the people interviewing you the information they need to evaluate you. And then the second is helping people get to know you so they create a relationship with you. And a couple of frameworks here. One is, the more I get into this, I'm learning the better communication is emotional, rational, and inspirational. Did any of you see Biden's last speech? Hands up, those. So not a political statement. This is just a communication statement. Mm-hmm. That was a pretty good speech because he did those 3 things. He started out emotionally, connecting with people. This has been tough. We feel for all these people. And that went on for 7 or 8 minutes. He connected with people. And then he got rational. Okay, here's where we are. Here's what's going on. Here's what's happening. Here's what we know. And then he ended with an inspiration. Here's where we go. And you got to connect with people.
Apparently he had a copy of your book.
Clearly. I watched Mank last night. Anybody seen the movie Mank?
Yeah,
Yes.
he did.
So this guy, he was one of the world's master communicators in some ways. In some ways, he was the organ grinder's monkey. But do you all know his influence on Wizard of Oz?
No,
You've all seen the Wizard of Oz.
sure.
So he did two things that were beyond brilliant on it. The book, The Wizard of Oz, was mostly about Oz. There was a little bit on Kansas, mostly about Oz. And Mankiewicz said, we've got to dial up Kansas. We've got to help people understand Dorothy and make an emotional connection with her before we get her to Oz. Emotional first. Second thing he did was, he was the one who said the Kansas piece has to be black and white to distinguish it from Oz. So Oz was color, Kansas. So he did that because he gets the emotion. So as you're communicating in a job interview, boy, this is a long answer. Just kick me under the table, Matt, if it's too long. But
Sure.
There's a rational piece, which is the exchange of information, and there's an emotional piece. And you can, in some ways, do them both in a live interview. One thing to consider in a Zoom interview is to split the two apart. And there's a couple of reasons for doing this. You all know the difference between introverts and extroverts, right?
A little bit, yes. Although I don't know if everybody truly understands it, but largely, of course, we're introverts, right?
Well, so
Largely.
because I'm an extrovert. I
would never have
extroverts
guessed.
like me, we think with our mouths. I'm better in a debate. I love being challenged, and I love when stuff's going on. Introverts, and if you're introverts, you can help me understand this. I'm told, I have no experience with this, but I'm told that introverts think with their brains. Hard to understand, but and it's not a judgment on how people communicate or whatever, but it's about how they process information. Introverts are happier when they can see something and digest it and then talk about it. So if I'm going into a big presentation, a meeting, trying to sell something, I always send everybody a copy of stuff in advance. The introverts will read it, and then they're better able to contribute in the meeting. The extroverts won't look at it until I present it to them, but it gives them an equal playing field. Make sense?
Yes. Oh, wow. That's an excellent observation.
So if it works for meetings, you would think it would work for interviews too.
Mm-hmm.
And so one argument for interviews would be to two-step and split apart the exchange of information and the connection. And the thought would be there are questions. There's only 3 questions. All they're going to ask you is, do you really will you love this job? Can you do the job? And can we tolerate working with you? Or strengths, motivation, and fit. Those are the only questions. You're all senior leaders. Every interview question you've ever asked anybody, every interview question you've ever been asked is a subset of one of those 3 questions. Well, if you agree with that, which you should, because I'm right, there are only 3 questions, and there are only 3 answers. Now, the hard part is, the hard part is, in an interview, and you know this, nobody cares about you. All they care about is what you can do for them. So when they ask you about your strengths, they don't care about your strengths. Wait, you just asked me about my strengths. All they care about is, do you have the strengths we need to do this job? When they ask you about your motivation, hey, what do you love doing? What's really important to you? They don't care. All they care about is, will you love this job? And when they ask you, hey, tell me how you work with people, tell me your values, or some fluffy stuff like that, they don't care. All they care about is, can we tolerate you? So
One of the little recognized facts on job search is that after you get on the candidate list, everybody who they're going to interview is technically qualified to do the job.
right, exactly.
They've already sorted out all the people who really can't do the job.
Oh, we can go into this for a while. So bring me back to motivation.
Well, not totally
afterward.
eliminated, but we've done it. We've tried.
Well, so bring me back to the motivation question when I finish this thought before I don't lose it.
Yes, please.
So only 3 questions, only 3 answers. So if you do your homework, one of the ways to distinguish yourself from all the other qualified candidates is to know what they really care about on motivation and be prepared to explain how your motivation matches what they need. To know what strengths they're looking for and give them examples of how you have those strengths. And I chose those words carefully. And understand their culture and then explain to them how you will fit with that culture. And the motivation question has become my favorite question. I tell everybody to start every interview with a question: why would you want this job? And in the first 4 seconds, you just learn so much about people. Anybody know the George Bradt theory of happiness? You don't know this. What's the matter with you people? so
We're waiting for
okay.
you.
All right, you want to write this one down because this is one you're going to want to remember.
George,
Okay.
remember, you didn't send the documentation beforehand. We're all introverts. We had to condense it, right? We had to take it to our brain. This is all on the fly.
It's so fair. Thank you, Tom. It's a really good point. Okay, so write this one down and let you ponder it. Happiness is good.
Okay.
It doesn't do it for you?
Now, mine is happy people work harder.
Yeah, that's true too, but that's a different story. That's engagement.
I don't want to hire
now.
somebody who's going to be unhappy in a job, and that can lead to even people who are relocating. I'm very tuned into people who are relocating, and the place I'm going to relocate them, I want to make sure that they really understand who these people are.
No, that's totally fair. So happiness is good. It's actually 3 goods. Everybody, I've become convinced that everybody in the world is motivated by a combination of doing good for others, doing things they are good at, and doing good for me, not me, good for themselves. And different people have different balances. Mother Teresa, way out there, doing good for others. My contemporary at college, this guy Yo-Yo Ma, cello player, he doesn't care about anybody else. He doesn't care about money. He just wants to do what he's good at, which is make music. And some of my nameless investment banker friends may care more about just doing good for themselves and making money than others, but most people are a balance.
Mm-hmm.
So if I ask you why you want this job, you're going to tell me in 5 seconds which of those is your primary motivation. Because if your answer is, oh my gosh, I love what your company is doing, I love the way you're making impact on the world, I have to be part of the way you're helping these people. Well, that's good for others. If you say, are you kidding? Why do I want this job? It's like I've been in training for this job my entire life. I've built skills at this, and this. This job totally leverages my skills. I am the perfect candidate for you because I have exactly what you need. That's doing what I'm good at. If it's, why do you want this job? Listen, I have really wanted to be a CFO all my life. And this is the opportunity. And that's why I'm so excited about it. Then you care about good for me. And I know that in 5 seconds. And I can pretty much rule you out 2 out of 3 times if I know what I really care about. So that's why I love the motivation question. Anyway, so So,
Let's talk about communication because that's what we promised we would talk about.
well, and that's where I am.
That we're now
So,
required to change as we're going to come out of it.
well, so with the argument,
I have a question, George. I want to ask you a question.
I already asked her.
I liked what you said and about the idea of splitting, especially on Zoom. But my question is, isn't there a way, even on Zoom, to, through your body language, through your voice and vocal tone and whatever, to really connect with people and still relate to the other part, so that they get to know you some because they can hear it in your voice, but they get to know what you can do. Is that possible, or do you really think it has to be broken up?
no, I'm pushing the extreme. In most cases, we're going to have to do both at the same time. And I'm going to get to sort of, Peggy, what you just talked about in a second. So I want to hold that because where I'm getting to is this framework for these different approaches.
Mhm.
And the suggestion is, if you can, in an interview or other things, think about flipping the classroom. And the flipping the classroom, everybody know the flipped classroom model?
Looking
Anybody
at
not
it,
know
you're looking at it from their perspective rather than looking at it from your perspective.
No.
No.
That's also important. But the flipped classroom model is, the old way of going to school is you go to class, you'd hear a lecture, and you go home and do the homework. The flipped classroom is you watch the lecture in advance. They give you a video for the lecture, and then you do the homework in the class, and so the class is all discussions and interactions and whatever. That's flipped classroom. So the flipped classroom is where I was going with this, where you send people the answers to their obvious questions in advance. And you send them the data, you send them what you've done, your experience, why you want the job, all this stuff. And then what that allows you to do is, and you can do that asynchronously. They can look at it whenever they want in the 24 hours before your interview. And then on the Zoom meeting, which is synchronous, then you can focus on relationship building because they'll probe it, but it'll be more of a conversation than a presentation. Instead of it just being Q&A, it'll be more of a discussion. So the framework that I've kind of created for communicating and call it the post-COVID Zoom world is, you want to be in person for relationship building if you can, or any emotionally charged situation. And failing in that, if it's going to be a Zoom or Teams or Google, whatever it is, the less people, the better. Ideally it's one-on-one. If it's 1-on-3, it's, whatever. But and this is good because I can see all 7 or 8 people that are on the call. So that's
emotionally charged situations. You want to have just a small group.
Really small. The more emotionally charged, the fewer the group.
Interesting.
We just had a conversation, 2 hours ago. We're about to tell a whole bunch of people they're about to get a new boss. And they said, okay, so we're gonna have a meeting. I said, no, we're gonna tell them one-on-one because they're gonna be emotional. They're gonna be emotional about this. And if they're gonna be emotional, we want them to be able to be emotional one-on-one, not in a group. If they're directly involved, we can have a small group. But so emotionally charged, it's in person. At the other extreme is where you're just sharing information. Well, then, you can just share it to everybody all at the same time, whatever. And somebody changed my whole mind on this. And if you want input, this guy said, you really want to do it asynchronously, which means not all at the same time. And what they do is they've got 1,300 people working for them. They're all remote. And when they want input on an idea, they put it up on their intranet, and they let everybody provide comments on it. And they get comments from all 1,300 people. They get I know you guys won't believe this, finance people giving creative comments and creative people giving number comments. And because it's asynchronous and everybody just to give their comments, there are no barriers. So sometimes the asynchronous virtual allows you to do things. Anyway, so the framework was a long time to get to it, Matt, but the framework is in-person versus virtual, synchronous, same time versus asynchronous, relationships, building better in person at the same time, especially for onboarding. You're going to do your interviews same time. For emotionally charged. Extroverts have a bias to synchronous. Introverts have a bias to asynchronous, so they can think about things and reflect on them. Flip classroom, diverse input you want to do asynchronously. And the other thing that happens is, and you've seen this, Zoom is either the greatest time management suck or the greatest time management enabler. So organizations that have said this is great, people don't have to travel to work anymore, they've got all this free time, we'll let them do stuff they want during their free time and we'll have fewer meetings, it's fine. The companies that are having Zoom fatigue are the ones that have figured out people aren't commuting anymore. So instead of doing our meetings from 9 to 5, we can do them from 8 till 6. And so I don't know how many of your friends you've heard say, I'm on Zoom meetings 10 hours a day. And I don't even get time for a bathroom break. I don't get time for lunch. And it's because people are misusing the tool. And it can be a time management tool. Now, Peggy, to go to the questions you asked, which are just, it's exactly the next point. I really believe, and Matt's heard me say this a gazillion times, I stole this from one of my old bosses, everything communicates.
Yes, it
If you
does.
think about it, it's
Just so everyone
5.
knows, I have several people in my life that they've taught me one really, really important thing. And this is the one George has taught me, that everything communicates.
And when you're communicating, think 5 senses all the time. And some of you you've heard it or seen this bastardized things of Mahembrain's study, where it's the 10-35-55 rule, which is really the 7-38-55 rule.
Yeah, that right from Moravian.
Yeah, that's the guy. I can't
Albert
pronounce it.
Moravian.
Yeah, that guy.
Yeah, that guy. I talk about him all the time.
That guy. Yeah, that's the guy. So that guy, and what he said is 7% of the message received pertaining to feelings and attitudes is in the words that are spoken. You're going to remember everything communicates because Matt underlined the point. 38% of it is, his word was paralinguistic, which is the way the words are said. So tone. And 55% of it, he said, was in facial expression. So if somebody says they like my shirt, okay, I don't know what to do with that. If they go, I like your shirt. I like your shirt, that's fine. If they go, I like your shirt, it's communicating a totally different message. So you can twist things. So you got to pay attention to that. So if you think about 5 senses, so you've got sight, which is the written word or written numbers. It's the format. I mean, I don't know how many times I've gotten stuff and looked at it and said, format doesn't count. I mean, I was talking to one guy earlier today, I don't remember who it was, who was saying, can you believe some people send emails without capitalizing their name, capitalizing the first letter in their name in the from box? What's the matter with these people? So some people look at format.
This will remain one of those unanswered questions.
Yeah. So formatting counts for some things. I mean, you all get guaranteed. There's an email in your inbox today that says, pardon the typos, I sent this from my phone.
I hate that.
How is that an excuse? That was like my college roommates coming in and saying, hey, sorry about what I did last night. I was drunk. You chose to get drunk. You chose to not pay attention to your format. So some people care about format or appearance or context. So, if you're in a Zoom meeting, you already figure this out. Pay really careful attention to your backgrounds. And, I'm looking at 8 different backgrounds here. And, it's looking like most of us were reasonably choiceful about what we did, where we choose to be, because everything communicates, the pictures in the background, how nice things look, and you can, it's so tempting, but I'm not doing it. But so the choice of your background, the choice of what you wear.
Since you brought it up, I had to get something from my printer. A client, I have 9 candidates interviewing for a controller's job, totally remote in Los Angeles. 9 people. Their lead candidate sent a note confirming his appointment, and it reads, got it, THX, comma, letter C, letter U, and the word then.
Unbelievable.
And the client's comment was, the below is the oddest response I've ever seen in an interview context. To your point, everything communicates. What does this say about this person?
If I was interviewing,
There
I
he
would
goes from the lead
remove
candidate to
him.
the last in line.
Well, but wait, let's understand the context. That response to be creative director of an ad agency would be fine, because you want free flow, an attitude, whatever. That response to be controller of a company, where by definition you're supposed to be into the details, is ridiculous.
Well, exactly, and to continue the discussion, I think the reality is we have so many powerful tools today, and you have to know when to use them.
Amen to that. So that's sight. This is only the first of the senses, but you get it? Words, format, appearance, context. Sound. So not important for email, but suddenly really important for phone calls and videos and whatever. And it's tone. We talked about tone. It's distractions. I mean, I get that everybody's been working from home, and the first few weeks, nobody could figure it out, and there were cats wandering around and kids screaming and whatever. I mean, at some point, those distractions become part of who you are and what you're willing to accept. Kids screaming, music playing, loud noises. I mean, one of my premises is that audiences get the performance they deserve. Imagine the difference between being at, actually, you know what? Let's just talk about a tennis versus a hockey game. Tennis matches, professional tennis matches, the audience is quiet and they're paying attention. Hockey games, the fans are screaming. I mean, have you ever compared how many fights you see between professional tennis players versus fights on a hockey game? It's a different kind of.
Of course, tennis players, you create a lot of racket.
Cute.
George, you set me up for that one. Sorry.
That was just right there. that was a third serve. but
you're right.
But so if audiences get the performance they deserve, it's not just the presenter. It's the people listening to the presenter, how much they're paying attention, what they're doing, how they look, how they dress, how they care. So that's sound. Touch. So touch, comfort, safety, human connection. This is more live, except paying attention to how the people you're talking to feel. I've got a big client. I do a lot of work with him. And I was on one Zoom call with him, and he said, I'm on 12 hours of Zoom calls a day, which is a different problem. And then I was on a call with him 2 hours later, and it was a smaller group. And I said, hey, let me see your chair. And he stood up. Steve, would you stand up for a second? Let me see your chair. Good, thank you. Nice. So this guy's chair was not a great deal unlike Steve's chair. It was a dining chair, it was a little spindlier. And I said, this just isn't good enough. And so I went online and I got to Herman Miller and I shipped him one of their brand new top of the line Aero chairs to show up the next day at his house. And now he's more comfortable. And here's the dirty little secret. Every time he sits down in that chair, 14 hours a day, he thinks of me. It's a beautiful thing. But, paying attention to comfort, safety, the human condition, smell, when you're live, it's the context. Different people react to different smells. Do you really want to meet in a garlic filled restaurant? Do you want to meet, think about where you're meeting and then taste. And the taste one's like, okay, this is bonding over food and drink. Y'all have figured out you can do that virtually. Some of you probably done this. We had a team meeting for our little company, Prime Genesis. We sent everybody cocktail mixers. And then we hired a mixologist to teach everybody how to make cocktails. We were all making the same cocktails at the same time in different places. We were all experiencing the same taste. It was a bonding experience. So, Peggy, I delayed your point about tone and manner and everything because I wanted to make it within this context. How did I do?
You did good. You did good. I would say the thing that I talk about that you didn't talk about was when you're talking about connecting, that I think there's something that people don't think about in what I call the virtual handshake. And I think that, we were so used to shaking people's hands, and now people say, well, how can I connect if I can't shake their hand? And so I'm on Zoom, and I think we can have virtual handshakes.
And say more about the virtual handshake.
Okay, I think that how many times, and I've been on Zoom calls where, you see people log in and either they're busy checking their camera or their seat or looking still as they click join the meeting, they're still looking at their email. A virtual handshake is when I am prepared for the meeting, everything is set, I've checked it up, and when my camera comes on, I think you stop, you wave, you probably lean in a little bit, you look into the camera, you smile. All of those things are going to instantly make that person feel that you are happy to see them, happy to be there, and engaged and ready. And that is a virtual handshake. And I don't think a lot of people do that.
I love that. And the other thing a lot of people don't get is how to look people in the eye on Zoom, which is not to look them in the eye. You guys all get that, right? Because their eye is the camera, not their picture. And so that's tricky. I'm looking around and, just to say you don't want to stare at somebody in the eye all the time. That would drive you nuts. But you gotta connect back with that eye every once in a while.
Well, you do. And I find that when you're talking, looking into the camera is important because it's not like you're staring. It's like people feel that you're really speaking to them. But when you're listening, you should be looking down at them. And when you get good at understanding the importance of looking into the camera, then you can do what I like to think of as a dance. You can look in the camera and look down. But too often, when I work with clients, I find if they take that break, then they just stop looking into the camera. They get so mesmerized that I'm looking at you that they forget that camera is there. And they think you feel that I'm there. And it is a dance.
Cool.
So George, we're into the last 15 minutes here. We're opening it up to questions. I think some of the things on Zoom are not well understood. You can. One of my friends made the comment that people who work for him felt they knew him better because on Zoom they could see him up close. And the other element of that is that even if you're not the speaker, if your camera's on, people may be watching you, and you need to be aware of that. And again, let's go back to the main point. Everything communicates. So you have to be careful what it is that you're communicating. If you as a leader aren't paying attention, for example, that's a lead and you can take it from there.
So I've got one client that I have more than one client, there's a different client. They've been doing a bunch of large scale webinars where they've had 1,300 people listening to one person.
Mm.
And this guy goes off and looks at everybody. And they don't know that the camera's on them because it's not on whatever it is, galley view, it's on speaker view, and they don't realize that people are looking at him. And he's looking at people to see who's engaged and who's not. So they're watching you, Big Brother's watching you.
Yeah.
Well, I also think that when people come to even a meeting like this, other people see you, and going back to your senses and connecting, if I see somebody and they look engaged, they look like I can connect, I'm going to see them and I'm going to go, oh, I want to meet this person, or I'll have their name and I'll connect with them. If they are sitting there looking either not professional or not engaged in some way, then all of those things are sending that message. And I'm going to say, I don't want anything to do with this person. He's not on my team.
Love it.
Again, we're open for
Right.
questions. If you want to, we're a small group today. So if you want to unmute and ask your question, Tom, I see you unmuted.
So George, if we go back to the beginning, your conversation on onboarding, what I'm looking for, and I have my own factual perspective, does that first impression of when you accepted an offer and you're in the first day experience, do you see that as an indication of a successful company and a potential failed company? Is that a good first impression for an incoming employee to determine whether or not what they have in front of them is potentially, I made the right decision, or I should be running for the hills?
The short answer is yes, but. And the yes is back to everything communicates. So back to my books. This is for the leader going into the company. This is for the person bringing somebody into the company. And one of the main points of this book is everything communicates, and you need to be really careful how you welcome people. So that's the yes. The but, though, is on both sides. If you wait till day one, you've blown it. We've got 4 critical ideas that we tell everybody. People going to new jobs. Get a head start. Manage the message. Set direction and build the team. And then sustain momentum and deliver results. It starts with get a head start. Let us imagine, if you would. Tom, I'll pick on you. I'm joining your company. It gets worse. I'm coming in as your boss, which Matt will tell you is like your worst nightmare. It gets worse. You wanted the job. And they decided to bring me in from the outside. And I show up day one. And I do the HR stuff and I sign in and fill in all the paperwork and whatever. And then day 2, I go to a management meeting because I'm management and you're not. You get the point. I got the job, you didn't. You're like doggy do. I'm important. And day 3, I come by your office and I say, hey, listen, Tom, I've heard good things about you. Hey, let's get together for lunch. I'd really like to get to know you. How are you feeling about me at that point?
Not good.
Yeah, not great, but it depends on where we're going for lunch.
Exactly, of course it does. So instead of that scenario, same thing, I'm coming in, I'm getting the job. I call you up the day after I'm announced. And I say, listen, I know you saw the announcement. Gosh, and I know you were one of the lead internal candidates for the job. They've told me amazing things about you. It just seems like it is in your best interest, my best interest, the whole company's best interest, for us to get off on the right foot. It's so important to me. I am not prepared to wait till day one to get to meet you. I will meet you. I've been fully vaccinated. I will meet you anywhere in the world, anytime you want in the next 3 weeks. Pick your time and place. I'd just like to get together with you and just to start to get to know you. Now, how are you feeling about me?
Much different.
Yeah, much different. You're going to end up hating me, but at least you're going to give me the
I'm
benefit.
probably going to fire you, but
Oh, and that's not day one. That's before day one. That's reaching out to a couple people. And if you are, if you're the controller, you got to reach out to the FP&A person. If you're the creative director, you've got to reach out to the publisher. There's always partners. There's always, one or two critical employees that make a big difference. There's one or two critical customers. There's somebody out there that is going to make the difference can make the difference to your success. And it's relationships first. So absolutely, day one is about the company establishing a relationship with the person, welcoming the company so they don't have buyer's remorse. It's about the person walking in and not making a fool of themselves. It's about figuring out which side of the road to drive on. So yes, it's day one, but you should start earlier. Nice question. Thank you. I'm ready for the next one. That was fun. Come on, hit me.
Chip, Karen, just jump right in. It's supposed to be a conversation. Otherwise, George is going to keep talking.
I got a comment. You talked about the look-see trip. How would you handle a preliminary look-see trip when someone's going to an overseas assignment using a Zoom meeting, especially when there's a family involved? I've been through it, but with the Zoom, how do you get the people ready for a trip like that?
I have no idea. I have not dealt with that. I'm having a hard enough time figuring out how to onboard people into new organizations on Zoom. The complexity of onboarding a family by Zoom, I haven't thought about
international.
Internationally. And I don't know anybody that's done it well. There's probably a business idea there. If somebody could figure that one out. Do you have good ideas on it? I haven't. You're over my head.
I've gone through both domestic and international moves, but it was always face-to-face with people that knew everything about where we were going and where we were coming from. But that's face-to-face and with a family. But now with the Zoom, it makes it much more complicated, especially when you have children. Something
it's great. I can make it up, but
it's a nice book.
My experience with Zoom has been that it's just so powerful and so helpful to me in my work. I've had a national search practice for 20 years, and up until everybody climbed on board the Zoom train, I never met my clients. And now I don't schedule very many phone calls anymore. I only schedule Zoom conversations because then I can read body language, and I do have a slight hearing loss, and I can turn the volume way up. So I am loving it. And
no, it's great. No,
relationships on Zoom. George?
Yeah, my reaction wasn't to Zoom. I mean, I'm loving Zoom. I'm using it. It was just I was thinking about, and I've done international assignments. I can't imagine getting my children to understand a culture over Zoom before they moved.
I have something that you should discuss with us in terms of communicating who you are and what you do and so forth and so on. We have I would list the primary tools, right? We've got phone, we've got email, we've got Zoom, and we have texting. Right? Those are the four biggies.
Yeah, don't discount handwritten
I'm
letters.
discounting in person, Chris. Right now.
Yeah, but I was saying don't discount handwritten letters. How many emails did y'all get
You have
yesterday?
a problem to solve. You open up your toolbox. What do we do?
I mean, so the question is, how many emails did you all get yesterday? The answer is going to be somewhere between 50 and 5,000. How many handwritten letters did you get yesterday?
Zero.
So if, I mean, we'll go to the extremes. If after an interview, your follow-up response is THX, see you soon, that's one extreme. You can write a really, really well-written email, or you can write a short email saying thank you, and then follow it up with handwritten notes to everybody that interviewed you, sent overnight to get there the next morning. Not a lot of your competition's doing that. Those will get read.
But take the conversation, the various personality types and so forth. Perhaps it would be frightening to send an introvert a text.
Because they feel they have to respond.
Yeah, it's very immediate. When I have to reach someone, I have to reach them. So I will first call them. If I don't get through, I will then send them a text message, and then I'll send them a confirming email.
I mean, absolutely. And it was, it's back to one of the initial premises. And I think you had this in the email you sent out.
Yeah.
I mean, my argument is writing or texting or emailing is particularly good for sharing information, ideas. It's one way. Phoning adds tone and real-time back and forth. The video adds the facial expressions, what we were talking about a few minutes ago. And then in person allows you to play with all the different senses you're going to use. The other premise I had, and we didn't quite get to this, is we're never going to go back to the way things were. Even when everybody's vaccinated, we are just not going back to, I cannot imagine a client flying me across the Atlantic for a 1-hour meeting again. I think they'll say, come in by Zoom. And so we're never going back. So the pandemic is an event that changes the way everyone in the world thinks and acts. It, by definition, is going to be a point of inflection for every individual and every organization on the planet. So you've got one of three choices if you're running an organization. Your culture is going to evolve. You can either get out of the way and let the culture evolve on its own, giving up control. That's a choice. You can bring people back to your bedrock values and do your darndest to restore your previous culture, which is gonna fail, but you can try. Or you can take advantage of the momentum for change and deliberately evolve your culture and work with your senior leadership team or your peers, your boss, whoever you're working with, and say, what do we want this thing to look like a year from now, 2 years from now? And make the choices in the way people behave and the way they communicate, in the way they make choices, in the way you delegate or don't delegate things. Because the other thing that happened is a lot of the organizations that are surviving went to command and control. They treated it like a crisis. And senior leadership got together and said, okay, we're going to tell you what to do. It's a crisis and we've got to adjust every day. And so they were flexible and they were agile, but it was command and control. And as the pandemic ends and they want to distribute decisions again, it's going to be hard. Not hard for the people that they're distributing it to, hard for the leaders to give up command and control. So there are choices to be made.
All right, so we're kind of wrapping up here. George, what did we forget to talk about?
We did not.
We covered our ground, you think?
Listen, we made the points we wanted to make. And hopefully it registered on some people. I am ridiculously findable. If anybody has any follow-up questions, I'm Google George Bradt. I show up everywhere. I'm responsive. And you can get to me with text, email, voice. You can call me. You can send me a handwritten letter. You can just go outside and yell really loudly.
I think you'd have to yell really loud, but you could. I think we've been given Zoom has given us a gift where we have to like the genie in the bottle, we have to learn how to use it properly as we're moving out of this COVID-19. Can't meet person to person with anyone. We're going to have to evolve, and this is a great tool. I liked your point about no one's flying across the Atlantic for a 1-hour meeting anymore. And a lot of people were doing stuff like that, and they were incurring a lot of lost time. I don't know, the private equity people that I deal with, I don't know how they were spending so much time on the road and getting anything done when most days I work from 9 to 9:30, and sadly, that's not a half an hour. If I was traveling all the time, I don't know how I'd do it. But I think your points are well taken here. We have to be sensitive to people's basic styles, introvert, extrovert, and also to the nature of the communication. I think those are your big points, are they not?
They are. You listened well, sir.
Good. Well, I try to pay attention.
You spoke well, sir.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Any last questions from the audience? We have not a lot of people on the call, so anyone has any last questions? Going once, going twice. All right. Well, George, I want to thank you so much for being on Chat with Matt. Hopefully we'll do it again someday soon as we evolve into this new world where surviving your onboarding is going to be key. Again, George has books you can buy, and I hope you'll buy them because they're all good reads. And I hope you'll join me again on Chat with Matt. We have a few more coming up in the weeks to come that I think you will find of interest. So again, thank you. And if anybody has any loose change they want to donate to the networking group, we can always use a little money. So thank you for joining me on Chat with Matt, and stay safe out there. Take care.